Bom dia de novo. Welcome to this morning's second session about increasing sustainability standards through trade deals. We have another great panel. But first of all, don't forget to send us your questions. They are very important to us. So in the box beneath me, in the FFA platform, please do write your question or your comment. They are very, very important. So, I want to introduce you Bruno Bombone, President of Portuguese Chamber of Commerce, President of ICC. Welcome.
Thank you.
You have 3 or 5 minutes to express your ideas about the subject.
Thank you very much. I didn't know I was going to be speaking in English, so I prepared myself in Portuguese. I hope I will be able to change on the last minute. And I would just say, as a start, I'm feeling a little bit thirsty. I don't know if it was the last panel that led me like this. But, well, thank you very much for having me here. It's a great opportunity to share some views, some preoccupations that we have. And I think that for Portugal, specifically, is a very, very important moment. We have been through a pandemic, something that we were not prepared to, that raised some very important issues related with health, with survival, but also very, very strongly affecting economy. We affected the quality of life of people. We affected the capacity of surviving of people, of families, and enterprises. And this is a very, very specific worry for our future. Although the agriculture sector was not the most affected one, because people, as Eduardo said before, still eat 3 times a day, so we need to use the agriculture for that. The fact is that most of the other sectors had a very strong impact, and if we come to speak about tourism, that was terrible. In any case, we understood one very important question with this pandemic, is that we are too much dependent on abroad, on the outside, on very, very important issues, on very important products for us. So we understand that we have to reinforce, invest on getting more productivity, more products, more capacity of producing within Portugal. And the agriculture, we knew that already, that we needed to go abroad, we needed to have more capacity, more competitiveness to be able to get our products abroad. And we did this in the past with the industry and services. But I think now it's the right time for the agriculture. If we want to be producing more, if we want to have the capacity of producing better products, it means that we have to raise productivity. It means that we have to be more able to do this. And this means also that if we are willing to be able to produce more, we need to find new markets. That means that we have to go abroad. We need to internationalize our agriculture also. But I think that we have here a problem of the egg and the chicken, because to get more productivity and more competitiveness, we need to be internationalized, and to become internationalized, we need the productivity and competitiveness. That is very, very important that we start. In any case, for that, I think that we should also think a little bit on bringing a new issue to this subject. If we are going to internationalize our production, we shouldn't remain with the agriculture products. We should go a step ahead. And the agro-industry is something that is very special. Why? Because we keep the added value within our country, and that is very important. But now I'm going to speak a little bit about the sustainability, which is what you've asked me to come here and speak. We have this, it's something that we cannot avoid. It's already here. It's one of the big issues in the United Europe, in the European Union, which means that we have to deal with it. In the agriculture, I think the subject was already here. We've been discussing this for a long, long time, and we are worried, as it was said in the previous panel, with the ecology, with the ambience, with the water, with energy, with all this. But there's one question that is very much a worry for myself. I know that we need to take care of the world, we need to take care of the ambience, we need to take care of everything around us, but all this has to be done with one very important objective, which is the person, the human person. And this is what we should be looking into. We need very much to be able to guarantee to everybody a dignified life. We need to worry that one person can always live with decency, that this person is able to pay for his costs of living, that he's able to pay an education to their children, that he's still able after that to invest on his own education, on his development professional, personal, and cultural. This is what I define normally as everybody has a right to a dignified salary. But the dignified salary can only be paid if we talk again about productivity. Productivity is a must. We have to raise productivity to better pay to the people, to allow them to develop themselves. This is also sustainability. And the only thing we have is by getting productivity, raising productivity, we will have more wealth, and we have to make sure that we distribute this wealth among everybody. I just want to leave you here one little detail that I think is important. We have, at this moment, to bring our agriculture, to bring our economy to a next step, we have to invest a lot on international relations. We are members of a very important group internationally, which is the European Union, one of the strongest economies in the world. And at this moment, we have the presidency. That means that we are now in a fantastic position to promote international relations. One of the areas that we should look into is the Portuguese-speaking countries. We have a capacity, a cultural advantage. We have a very, very strong capacity of getting there, and they are in much need of our support. But it's also one place where we can take a lot of advantages, where we can take some profitability, and where we can do a fantastic job. Well, thank you very much. I don't know, I took a little bit longer than expected.
It's okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Bruno. Now I would like to introduce Pascal Rouillet, who is online with us, Secretary General, European Liaison Committee for Agriculture and Agri-Food Trade. Welcome, Pascal. The floor is yours. 3 or 5 minutes, please.
Thank you, Christina, for the nice introduction. I hope you can hear me well.
Perfectly.
Yes, okay. But first of all, good morning from Brussels, and not too rainy Brussels today. I wish I could have been in Portugal physically, but I think we're all now used to those remote meetings. First of all, I would like to thank the organizers to have invited me to your fantastic regional congress today. And under the Portuguese presidency of the EU. The Portuguese presidency is extremely ambitious when it comes to trade, and we actually, as CELCA, share this ambition. So it's a great honor to be able to address your panel and the conference today. A few words about my organization. CELCA is the European umbrella organization representing the trade in agri-food and commodities. So our members are the sectorial organization representing the trade in wine, meat, dairy, arable crops, grain, sugar, eggs, etc. And we roughly represent 35,000 trading companies from SMEs to large sizes. So today, the session is about increasing sustainability standards through trade deals. And before I go into the subject, just wanted to remind everybody and the participants that the EU is actually the first global leader in exports of agri-food. In 2020, exports of EU agri-food reached 184 billion. But in parallel, we're also a major importing bloc. And again, in 2020, and those are the stats from the European Commission, imports represented 122 billion. So we have actually a very positive trade balance when it comes to agri-food trade, but I think it's important to give the figure to demonstrate the power of the EU in terms of global trade and also in terms of soft power when it comes to standards and sustainability. And actually, this theme, I think, is very timely as sustainability in general is gaining momentum. I shall say that for us, I mean, there is no definition of sustainability as yet at EU level, and we expect the Commission to come with a proposal on environmental sustainability and sustainability in the food system in 2023. Having said that, our organization, as many, share the views that sustainability is based on 3 pillars: economic, social, and environment. Now, obviously, there are more and more attention on the environmental pillar of sustainability. And you know that last year, the European Commission published the Farm to Fork strategy that was also mentioned in the first panel. And this year, DG Trade, so the Commission responsible for trade, published the revision of the EU trade policy. And looking at these two strategic orientations from the EU, we can see that the focus is very much on environmental sustainability. So how we see trade actually promoting sustainability, including environmental sustainability in the months and years to come. But first of all, because I have the floor, I'll take the opportunity to remind everybody that we think that trade in agri-food actually is sometimes too much overlooked or actually misunderstood. Trade actually plays a fundamental role in sustainability, meaning that, you know, trade finds outlets for products that would not necessarily find a market in the EU, or areas of surplus to areas of deficit. And basically, by the simple function of trading, we actually tackle food waste, and we find basically we support farmers in diversifying outlets for their products. So having said that, I think it's important to explain, and actually I'm sure you all know that the EU has been really in the front line of promoting sustainability, including environmental sustainability, in their free trade agreements with third countries. So the last generation of free trade agreements include sustainable and development chapter, and those chapter actually includes commitments on labor, environmental rights and commitments. And this you can see in the EU-Canada agreement, EU-Japan, and so on. Now, in the EU trade policy review that was mentioning earlier, the EU commits to now conclude sustainable food chapter with trading partners, and this will actually take effect in the negotiations that are currently taking place with Chile, New Zealand, and Australia. And as the representation of the trade in agri-food product, we find this chapter and this way forward very positive. It's based on collaboration and corporations, two words that have been actually referred to many times already this morning, but we can actually support that approach. So basically, this new chapter will bind the two parties, if you wish, in cooperating and collaborating in new areas, mainly a reduction in pesticides, fight against antimicrobial resistance, but also the raise in animal welfare standards, and so on. Again, the European Union market is a huge market. It was also mentioned by Bruno before me. We represent 446 million 446 million consumers or citizens. And so obviously we're an attracting bloc, an attractive market, and we can actually drive the discussion on sustainability. As I was also mentioning, the farm to fork actually shifts also very much towards environmental sustainability, and it will actually impact our European farmers. So as trader and really being driven by exports, so having a strong link with farmers of the EU and their industry, we completely understand the wish and let's say the call for a level playing field at international level. Having said that, that's why we think cooperation and collaboration is the way forward. So I was mentioning this new chapter that the Commission will engage with trading partners. We should also raise the profile of the international standards organizations. For us, it's absolutely critical that the Commission engage with trading partners in Codex Alimentarius or OIV, just to name a few. Again, I think it's important to understand that the EU is the first export global leader. So we would actually call the Commission when looking at other measures to promote sustainability to make sure that all those measures are actually WTO bulletproof and compliant. That would limit the exposure of our exports to unrelated disputes. I mean, you all know the long-standing dispute on, WTO aircraft, for example, and the European agri-food exports were actually very much impacted with 25% additional duties. So basically, because the EU is the first exporting leader of agri-food stuff, we want to make sure that there is no retaliation that would obviously impact the trade in agri-food in case measures are not WTO compliant. Now, we are reassured by the Commission in the EU trade policy review. The Commission stressed that any measures will be WTO compliant. This is very much welcome. We are waiting to see the details of future measures, and we will comment on those. So I think I'll stop there to leave time for a discussion. Again, I will just stress that cooperation, collaboration, two words that I think have been used many times today, are very key to help raising sustainability in trade in agri-foodstuffs. Many thanks.
Thank you, Pascal. Now I would like to introduce Emily Rees, Senior Fellow of the European Centre of International Political Economy. Welcome, Emily. The floor is yours. 3 minutes, please.
So first, bom dia, muito obrigada. It's a pleasure to be here in Santarém for the first in-presence event since the beginning of the pandemic. So I really wanted to thank the organizers for making this hybrid event possible. Before delving into the question of sustainability standards in free trade agreements, I wanted to touch upon perhaps the words of Janusz Potocznik's keynote of this session, where he mentioned the framework at an international level, and particularly the crisis that we're living at in the World Trade Organization, because I think that that very much provides us with the framework to understand why the EU is pushing so hard in putting these standards into free trade agreements. Essentially, when the World Trade Organization emerged in 1995, climate change wasn't the primary theme of the day, as was a number of other sustainability matters that we've been discussing today, and I'm sure we'll be discussing throughout the rest of the panels today. What we call in trade policy 21st century challenges. And so essentially now we're in a situation where in a way our international trade rules aren't exactly adapted to the challenges of sustainability. And this is creating frictions, as we can see. We heard Pascal mention the level playing field. I think that's one that we'll always hear come up in these conversations. And we're also in a moment of substantial reform of this organization, the World Trade Organization. We're hearing now that the agricultural negotiations are kicking off. So we're seeing a new interest here in actually renegotiating some of the commitments of the agriculture agreement at that level. One of the issues here is that, as mentioned, climate change was never put into the rule book. And so when the EU started looking at its trade agreements, and we've been seeing that agreement per agreement, these provisions are getting stronger and stronger, it started putting in the trade and sustainable development chapter, a number of sustainability commitments. And these are commitments from both sides, which call our trading partners to come into the fold in a number of ways, but also ensure that our commitments in a certain number of areas are also withheld. So what are we talking about when we're talking about sustainability in this setting? As Pascal just mentioned, we're talking about really a number of pillars to sustainability, the economic, the labor, and also the environmental. But it is true that the environmental, biodiversity, and climate change elements are really the main element today in the discussion. And in that, what is in it? Essentially, what we're putting in these chapters today are the Paris Agreement, so enshrining the Paris Agreement into trade deals, which has not been done at an international multilateral level. We're also putting in a number of other multilateral environmental agreements, such as the Convention on Biodiversity, for instance, biological diversity. Plant genetic resources is also an element that falls under that biodiversity pillar. We look at the sustainable management of forests, and that is obviously a big issue today as we try to tackle embedded deforestation in agri-food trade worldwide. Keeping in mind that the EU is responsible for approximately 10% of embedded deforestation in its imports, and more can be done using these trade deals as tools. We also look at the responsible management of fisheries and the responsible management of supply chains. So this is looking at integrating some of the OECD due diligence, UN Global Compact within the framework of these trade deals. Now, it's important to keep in mind that trade deals aren't the silver bullet. They can't resolve everything. So to think that because you're signing a trade deal, you're going to resolve deforestation is clearly a fallacy. However, they really do bring trading partners together in order to make new commitments. And trade deals are generally the starting point of a new relationship. That's why I like to say it's the wedding when we sign a marriage, but you still have a long commitment down the line in order to make the marriage work, let's say. So just to finalize on this thought, I think that one of the key things is that trade deals today really are the European Union's first diplomatic weapon when we're looking at sustainability. They really do present unique opportunities in that regard to project the Green Deal, to project the Farm and Fork onto the world, and also bring our partners to discuss these issues and make a more collaborative environment at a world level.
Thank you, Emily. Now I would like to introduce David Cleary, Global Agriculture, the Nature Conservancy. Welcome, David. The floor is yours. He's online with us.
Bem-vindo a todos e gostaria de agradecer aos organizadores
Bem-vindo a todos. Eu gostaria de agradecer aos organizadores do FFA
por fornecer essa oportunidade de matar
por esta oportunidade de matar saudades de falar português.
Infelizmente não matar a saudade do
I'd like to
Lisboa e de Portugal.
I'd like to thank you for this opportunity
Meus amigos lusitanos
to catch up on Portuguese.
meu sotaque é pouco abrasileiro.
As all the Portuguese friends will understand, I have a Brazilian accent, but this seems appropriate because we're going to talk about trade agreements,
Sobre o acordo
especially about agreements with Mercosur. So I think it's important to start at the very beginning. So, as Emily just said, trade agreements are a positive thing.
são positivos do ponto de vista social.
They're positive from a social and economic standpoint.
Latino, você tem países
Especially in Latin America, you have countries with an agricultural vocation, and their exports to the EU generate income, taxes, social benefits, so the access to the European market is essential. And a trade agreement between the developed world and the developing continent is an especially strategic agreement.
também na palestra inicial.
As also stated before, trade agreements
Em termos da sustentabilidade.
play a role in sustainability as well. Water was mentioned,
Estados Unidos, Brasil,
and we're talking about the USA, Brazil,
existem que não têm problemas com segurança de água. Então,
and there are countries that have no issues with water safety. And the USA and Brazil export products as commodities from those areas to Europe and China
isso ajuda bastante
on a global scale that helps do a strategic management of ecosystems. But it's also true that any trade agreement must reflect the values of the importing countries. And we are well aware that there's a critical mass in Europe of countries and people that are very concerned about human rights issues, sustainability issues, and it's very legitimate to say that people in Europe demand that any trade agreement include all these elements. So we have to think that the EU is a commercial boon for areas like Latin America, but we also have to think that the commodities that we're importing, we have to make sure that they're not part of systemic abuse of the indigenous people, human rights abuses, etc.
Ajudar a solucionar esses problemas nos países de origem, ao invés de simplesmente fechar acesso ao mercado europeu, quando de fato a Europa precisa ser parte
So
da
Europe
solução.
must be part of the solution for environmental issues and sustainability, and it's not enough to just
Como fazer isso?
get your team off the field.
E para muitos eu acho que
To myself and many others, I think the best way to implement
da União Europeia
the values of the European Union is to highlight
da legalidade.
the relevance of legal production.
Tem muitos atores na Europa
But in Europe, there are many actors
suficiente.
that complain that that is not enough.
Às vezes a regulamentação nos países de origem
Sometimes the legislation in the countries of origin is not enough. But it's true that
esquemas de regulamentação que
in most countries you have good
no país de origem
rules and regulations, but implementation can be an issue.
que é a legislação brasileira que regulamenta o comportamento.
In Brazil, there's legislation governing the relationship of producers to the environment. That's excellent. Those are excellent rules and regulations, better than European or American legislation.
Mas a melhor maneira que a União Europeia pode realmente ajudar a solucionar questões de desmatamento.
But the way the EU can help with deforestation issues is to insist on having resilient systems, strong systems, to monitor all the products that are imported into the European Union.
Organizadores do evento, mas daqui a 2 horas no Parlamento Britânico, o Parlamento Britânico vai estar debatendo o Environment Bill, nova legislação ambiental, que de fato vai criar uma obrigação para qualquer empresa britânica acima de certo tamanho que está utilizando commodities que têm risco de desmatamento.
To all companies that use forest risk commodities, they will have to prove that these commodities were produced in a lawful way.
Vai demorar 2-3 meses para passar pelos mecanismos.
And this legislation,
100% certo que isso vai ser
it will take this legislation 2-3 months to be approved, but approved it will be. But the goal is to make companies
esse tipo de mecanismo de verificação de
use that type of mechanism. They will need to assess the legal status of each product they import.
Nesse sentido também está sendo considerado na União Europeia pelo Parlamento Europeu nesse momento.
And the European Parliament is also considering this type of legislation. It will take somewhat longer.
Que no caso do desmatamento seria mais importante focar não na questão do desmatamento.
Some people say that when it comes to deforestation, there are other issues that concern us, and that will end up being discussed in the WTO. But I think we should focus on the legal aspect, because the monitoring mechanisms that need to be implemented in order to ascertain legality are the perfect starting point to any other initiative. Legislation can only get us so far, and from then on, commercial actors, like Emily said, they have to take point and improve and enhance their commitment. So I don't have a lot of time to talk about such a complicated issue, but in order to optimize and maximize our available time, I will stop now, and again, thank you for this opportunity.
Now I would like to introduce João Rui Ferreira, welcome, Secretary General of CE Liège. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Christina. And my first words are to thank Yellow and Thierry for the invitation, and to say also that it's a pleasure to share the stage with the other panelists, whether they are here or in the screen in front of us at home. So hello, everyone. And so, as David said, we are talking about trade deals, and as he was so kind to speak in Portuguese, I will try to do the same in English. I confirm he has a Brazilian accent. In the end of my speech, we will say which accent I have, but I will do so. And I will start by a clear statement. Sustainability is not an option anymore. Sustainability is the only option. And we have seen that from society to politicians all over the world embracing and taking sustainability in their speeches, in their policies, in their acts, acting as consumers, acting as citizens. We have plenty of examples from the US to the European Union. Today, sustainability is a key and is in the top of priorities. In Portugal as well, fortunately, not only the government, but the recently elected Portuguese president, Marcelo Rebelo de Sousa, also took sustainability as one of his key objectives and goals for the second mandate. And I think this is clearly important. And it's not an option because it's the only way we can achieve and accomplish with the goals we have, from the climate agreement to to the carbon neutrality that we have as an European continent. We have the ambition to offset in 2050. So everything seems to be aligned. And so trade plays a very important deal in all of this. And it plays an important deal because trade can be a tool, and the trade agreements and the trade deals can be a tool to get it there faster, to be more effective, to be more ambitious. And of course, the trade deals can, I divided this in 4 points. The first one is to promote sustainable consumption and sustainable productions. The second one, and it's very important when we are talking about regions like Portugal, it's to add local value and economic diversity to regions and economies that clearly can have an advantage on this. The third one, and I believe this is also very important, is that typically we cannot manage what we cannot measure. So these deals can really impose high sustainability standards and ways to measure how companies, how sectors are performing in terms of sustainability, to also make able to the consumers to decide where they are moving in their options. And the fourth, and not less important, is to put value over volume. That's where we want really to go, because resources are sometimes scarce, and we need to be very, very effective on all this. And so, and of course I'm here and I represent one of the sectors, and the cork sector, a typical sector from the West Mediterranean basin, of course very important in Portugal, in Spain, in the Iberian Peninsula, but a true example that sustainability, it's not something impossible to achieve, and it's a true example of sustainability. Focusing the 3 pillars, we have been talking a lot about this over the morning. I start by saying that the cork oak forests, and as Eduardo Oliveira Sousa mentioned previously, it's very important, it's not the forest itself, it's a human-managed ecosystem. So it's a real example where man and nature combine itself to a win-win situation. And of course, trade is a key for us. So that I give you some numbers. Over the last 3 years, the Portuguese exports of cork products passed 1 billion euros over the last 3 years. And not only this global value, it's impressive and makes us happy, but the most relevant fact is this very high added value. For each euro we are exporting in cork products, we retain for local economy 85 cents. So it's a really, really positive trade balance that we are taking in Portugal, Spain, and in the other countries that are producing cork. The second important reason that this is a good example and a paradigm probably is that it takes a true advantage for social impacts. Not only because it fixes people to land, to local communities where they can find jobs, where they can find work, where they can find progress and development, but also because it's one of the best agricultural and forest activity space all over the world. And we are not talking about very advanced economies like in North Europe and USA, but we are talking in Portugal and also in the north of Africa. And the third, but not less relevant, and before finishing saying that it's a true example of the environmental pillar on sustainability. We are talking about a species that lives in this part of the world over the last 10 million years, very well adapted to these conditions, very well adapted to live in scarce conditions of water, of temperature, and if not other advantages, this is an autochthonous species very well adapted to mitigate the climate change and to fight against the desertification. It's the last barrier that separates Europe from the Sahara Desert, and it's a true example of carbon sequestration. So that you have an idea, for each ton of cork it's produced, there is approximately more than 70 tons of CO2 that are retained. Retained in trees that live for almost 200 years. So it's the tree, and many of you know, but the tree is peeled every 9 years. A real example of sustainability, a real example of providing ecosystem services that go from biodiversity, that go to the soil management and to the regulation of hydrological cycles. And we have been talking a lot about water, and it is also very important that the soils are not moved, are kept the way they were, and this is a key tool as well. And so for the first intervention, it's what I would like to say, and we'll keep the rest for the second one. Thank you.
Thank you, João. You're talking about carbon, and we have a question from our public about carbon. It's for all panelists. What do you think of the idea of having a carbon consideration in trades? Who wants to start? Emily?
So I gather that the idea here is to discuss the carbon border adjustment mechanism, right, that's going to be proposed by the European Commission on the 14th of July as part of the Fit for 55 initiative, which is going to be a block of legislative proposals. The carbon border adjustment mechanism, essentially, the concept behind it is to offset, let's say, carbon leakage in imports into the European Union. So it basically would attach a carbon price onto the import coming in from a part of the world that does not have a carbon trading system. So in the European Union, this is generally the emissions trading system that we're looking at. And so part of the proposal, which we're waiting to see, obviously, would be to tax the import on the basis of the ETS of the day, which right now is, I must say, over the last few months, going through the roof. So we're now at around 50 euros per ton. But there are still some questions around this. Firstly, the question of WTO compliance is a very big one. Again, we'll wait to see the proposal to see how that functions, but I mean, there is no doubt that this will be disputed by a number of trading partners. Secondly, there's a question of the sectors involved. For the moment, the ETS is it only works for the industrial sector, for instance. It doesn't cover agriculture. So the carbon border adjustment mechanism effectively wouldn't cover agricultural imports. The understanding is that the sectors involved in a first step would be steel, aluminium, and cement, moving towards other sectors such as chemicals and fertilizers in a second stage. But again, we need to really see the proposal to be able to make any informed judgments over it.
Thank you, Emily. Bruno? How can commitments made under the UN Sustainable Development Goals best be included in international trade agreements, and what level of enforcement mechanisms are necessary?
Well, I would like to start by saying two things. First, sustainability, again, as I mentioned, has to do with people. So we have to concentrate a little bit more on what do we want to give people in the end. So I'm always a little bit afraid of becoming too technical and involving the technical side and forgetting about the people. We've seen that with the pandemic. We brought the virologists, we brought the journalists that were very active on this matter. Then we have the politicians that are very afraid of taking any decisions, and so they are influenced by these two, and in the end we are not sure that we've taken the right decisions to the benefit of the people. And with this kind of themes, I'm a little bit worried also about this. What I think is that we should work a lot on making civil society, a stronger civil society, that really understands also all these issues, that brings sustainability as an objective for themselves and be part of the decisions that we are taking going on this way. Europe is deciding a lot of things. They are discussing a lot, they are studying a lot, they are trying to do their best, I'm sure of that, but we should be more involved, because in the end it's for us to get there. So I think that trade agreements are very important, because they will guarantee that we will have the standard at the same level, and that is very important. In the past, we accepted a lot of trade agreements where we would allow other people not to have the standards that we had. We know that we were producing in the Far East with different conditions that we can produce in Europe, for instance. We don't have the social security down there, and we accepted the products competing with ours. in the trade agreements that we're talking here, we have to keep the kind of guarantees. But as was said here also, trade agreements don't ensure everything. You have to have the people committed with this. And so I think it's very important that we commit the people with that. After that, then we have the trade agreement, and of course we have to have rules and conditions to control the trade agreements that we've done. And so I'm very positive on that. We have to have the courage to make sure things are going to happen the way we want them to happen.
Thank you, Bruno. Well, we are a little bit short in time, so I'm going to ask your final words. And I'm going to start with Pascal and asking to all speakers to be brief, 1 or 2 minutes. Please, Pascal, your final words about this subject, please.
Yes, Christina, thank you. Thank you very much. And I found this panel very interesting, and I would like to also thank the colleagues who speak in the panel. I think for me, what is maybe crucial for the agri-food traders is collaboration, and I would say that it's, if I may say it this way, but it's a global collaborative race towards more sustainability. So we need to make sure this race is inclusive and that everybody and all countries actually understand and start shifting towards more sustainability. And I think previous speakers already said that I think this is something which is shared by everybody. There is no doubt about this. And just to go back to the question about the carbon adjustment mechanism, and just to complement what Emily said, for us, again, as representing exporters of agri-food products, it's very important that any legislative action adopted by the Commission is WTO compliant. So we avoid trade wars, trade irritants. Today, I think we need more and more collaboration and trade and, bridges amongst nations, and we should avoid at any costs trade irritants. So I'll stop there. Thank you again.
Thank you, Pascal. David, 1 minute, please, for your final words. David? Well, I don't think David is listening to us. So,
Can you hear me?
Yes, now I can hear you. 1 minute, please, for your final words, please.
Thank you. I'm actually going to switch to English. I can't resist the carbon question.
Okay.
So the problem we're trying to address, I think it's you need to use whatever tools you've got available. If the ETS can help, then that's great. But the reality is that anything that doesn't take account of agricultural imports is missing a huge part of the potential leverage that the EU is going to have. It's really important, I think, moving forwards that we look at other carbon tools as well. The most important, and I think the most urgent in terms of getting it folded into domestic and international trade policy, is consumption-based carbon accounting. This is basically a way of calculating the carbon content in embedded sort of deforestation and land conversion products, but it also takes account of the costs, the carbon levels used at every stage of the production process. The methodologies for calculating these right down to individual commodity level have been advancing really quickly over the last few years. The reality is that it's no good the European Union conducting all kinds of agricultural reforms at home if it's simply exporting its demand beyond the EU, and that's being supplied by the clearing of forests or carbon-intensive agricultural production methods. You're not going to be able to manage that footprint until each country is using carbon-based accounting methods and folding into its own NDCs, the nationally developed contributions to the Paris Accords, concrete plans of how it's going to either offset or minimize that embedded carbon in its products. So I would urge more attention on the towards the consumption-based carbon accounting, because I think until it's addressed, you're not going to be using the most important tools available to you to be able to manage the European Union's carbon footprint.
Thank you, David. João?
Well, it always feels that it's a lot still to say, but I will take these final minutes to take the word collaboration. And the word collaboration, it seems also to be a key to be able to achieve what we really globally want to achieve as a goal. And I think I will put this into the collaboration for our sector in two ways. The first one, in the side of the market and the consumption, it's the strong link we have with the wine world, with the wine sector. And we have here high representatives of the wine sector, and we have been working very strongly together. It's probably one of the longest marriages in the world for some centuries already, and there is still a lot to do. But it's clearly Cork can be a tool and help, and to make these two sectors even more sustainable, and to give these credits and this long-term relation even more profitable in the future, and we are doing a good effort on that. And the second act of the collaboration is what we have been doing between industry and forest owners. I think it's the Cork sector, it's a really good example of how these two worlds that apparently many times are living separately, we are working very close together, because in the end of the day, the success of one is the success of the others. And we are doing a strong effort to find ways to interact, to act in the soil, to act in the environment, to act in the landscape together, to find solutions that will be clearly positive for both. And I think it's a good example that we also should bring here and should probably motivate others to do the same.
Thank you. Emily?
In terms of final words, if I may, I think when we're looking at climate change, particularly in sustainability, I mean, the elephant in the room here clearly is fossil fuels, which is something that we haven't really discussed today. So how can we lower GHG emissions effectively is to reduce our use of fossil fuels. And in that, there are a number of instruments that can be used in trade policy. But also, if we look at fossil fuels, the EU isn't best in the class. So there's a lot of work that's going to have to be done at home here before pointing fingers also at trading partners. The energy matrix of the European Union is far from being renewable. We have still 25% of our emissions that come from the transport sector. So looking at how we're going to tackle the issues, for instance, of our own transport patterns, which is can be also from production to consumer, from retail to consumer, but also global shipping, sustainable aviation in the case of some of the higher quality produce that we export. All of those items count when we're looking at climate change. So my last point would be, let's not forget that we really do need to tackle fossil fuels, and that really should be front of mind.
Thank you, Emily. Thank you to all speakers, and now I'm going to speak in Portuguese. Muito obrigada a todos por nos terem.
Thank you, everyone,
nos terem acompanhado
for listening to us and for being with us in these two sessions in the morning.